Hello everyone, it's April Rose again, and I am live. I'm going to be joined shortly by a good friend of mine who is also an incredible teacher, and her name is Cheyney Teagan. She is a professional gigging belly dancer here in Austin, Texas, where I live, and I recently took a workshop from her called Body Tips, how to set and enforce safe performance boundaries. And I thought to myself, I could use those tips because Cheyney and I actually did a gig together not that long ago where a lot of unexpected things happened, including our performance being interrupted by audience members. And that happens so often. So when I went to this workshop, Cheyney gave so many clever tips. I just really wanted everyone else to get this knowledge too. And I see that she's ready to join, so I'm gonna chime her in. I'm gonna tell you more about this gig that Cheyney and I did together that went awry. It didn't fully go awry. Hello, Cheyney.
Hello. It did not go awry. You handled it masterfully.
Well, thank you so much. I loved what happened. Cheyney had a video of what happened and everything. And she has this whole intellectual breakdown of how I responded and what choices I made. And I just remember looking back on it thinking I didn't love the way I handled that. I want to have more skills at my disposal so that when that happens again, I'm able to handle it more skillfully. And when I watched Cheyney deal with it, I was, standing on the sidelines, and Cheyney also had the audience members getting up and taking over her show and joining it. She made them all laugh. She made the whole show so hilarious. At the end, they all loved her so much. They said she's the Charlie Chaplin of belly dance because she made them all laugh without saying anything, because she has all these miming things that she does. And it was so fun. And I really respect your ability to kind of take control of a situation that is going as it was not planned, but in a way that doesn't embarrass the people who are interrupting your show. And that's where I have a hard time because I love to embarrass somebody who's acting out of line.
A little well-placed shame goes a long way, I will say, but it's not always the best way to regain control of that situation and then keep those audience members on your side, and also keeping your event coordinator on your side, right? Because that's ultimately what we're there to do. We're there to do a show, right? Regardless of our talent level or however you want to judge that, we're there to entertain. And unfortunately, sometimes we get into some uncomfortable situations. And so securing your bag, if you know what I mean, you have to get creative with how you do that and handle that and reset those boundaries so that you stay in control. Otherwise, your whole performance goes away and you've lost it all. You have no more time to show off all your moves that you worked so hard for. So, and that's frustrating.
Yeah. Well, I want to properly introduce you. So I'm just going to read a little bit of your bio. Cheyney Teagan is an Austin-based performer, instructor, and musician specializing in rock sharky and American cabaret style. She is all about community and connections with people, and that's at the heart of her dance practice. And when Cheyney isn't dancing, she works on designing custom costumes and accessories, as well as producing dance shows that support local artists. And Cheyney is an incredible designer, and I know people are all the time looking for costuming. So contact Cheyney if you're looking for a beautiful custom costume. And I also can attest to this community-based lens that she approaches dance through, because she's always bringing the community into whatever she's doing, and it's really lovely and wonderful. So thank you so much for everything that you do for our local community here.
Oh, thank you. That's so sweet.
So I wanted to ask you, why is it important to establish boundaries with an audience when you're gigging?
Yeah, so as we talked about and I mentioned earlier, the most important answer and the short answer is safety, right? Your mental, emotional, spiritual, and bodily well-being is the most important aspect of that. And then number two, securing your bag, right? Ultimately, we're there to do a job, we're there to get paid. And so the finesse and the nuance with which you go through those things you know, we have all these soft skills that we're not always aware of. And so codifying it and having the tools in our tool belt when we have these situations come up is helpful in helping us maintain control of that situation. The long answer is that regardless of your experience or your commitment level to dance, or specifically belly dance in this case, when you perform for an audience in a public space, you have an opportunity to set the expectations from the moment you walk into the room. Within these expectations, you educate your audience on how to act towards you, towards the space, towards the people that you're involving. And this includes setting boundaries for your safety before, during, and after your performance. It also includes boundaries around tipping and payment within ways that make you feel the most comfortable. Because if you're not comfortable, you can't do a good job, right? You can't put on a good show. This gets a little tricky, especially with American audiences. When you go to gigs, you'll find that you have a mixed bag of experience levels with belly dance shows. Not everyone has seen a belly dance show. And so oftentimes the most parallel contexts that audience members can draw on are from like cabaret, burlesque, or strip clubs. And these are, I believe, all valid forms of work, but the expectations are different, right? Especially within the United States. Within the United States. So within our specific dance discipline, we are responsible for adhering as closely as possible to the cultural norms within which we have the privilege of being respectful guests. This means that we need to adhere to those cultural norms and social norms and teach our audience what those are. Also within belly dance, we have so many variables to think about that are not typical of other performance disciplines. We've got entrances and exits that we have to plan. We have props that are being used through tight spaces, like in a hookah lounge, right? Like I've got fire around me. I can't exactly just be having my veil go all willy-nilly. Or I have sharp objects like swords that are placed in high traffic areas because that's the best way for me to get to them. Also, you know, within belly dance, we have to be our own negotiators, right? Like we have to have that business savvy. We have to be our own audio techs, our own social media managers, etc. We have so many jobs. And within that dance form, like we open our hearts, we open our souls, our bodies up to people placing judgment on us, right? It's a beautiful thing, but sometimes there are some social commentaries that we open ourselves up to, or sexualization, despite whatever the intent is that we actually have within our performance presentation. So in having clear boundaries around our bodies and our performance spaces, we have a clear protocol for ourselves when things do get uncomfortable, because that will happen. You're going to have someone invade your space. You're going to have someone try to push boundaries. They don't mean to be rude. It's not often, you know, with malintent, but when those things happen, we can rely on the soft skills that we've built to navigate those situations while keeping our employer and the audience on our side, like I mentioned earlier, and thus ensuring that we get paid and maintain the good relationships as guests within the culture and that performance space. It was a long answer, but there it is.
Such a good answer. Thank you so much for explaining all of that. And what you're going to get today, everyone who's watching this right now and the recording later, is just like a tiny taste of the workshop that Cheyney is going to be teaching inside the Cohesion Collective soon. And I took this workshop from her in another context, and then that's why I wanted her to do it in the Cohesion Collective, because it was not only professionally very useful, because you give exact, like, the ideas for what exactly you can do when certain situations happen, and they're so clever, but also it was personally helpful as well, because you talked about the different trauma responses that we have and whether we're like doing fight, flight, fawn, or freeze. And I was able to self-reflect on what I do in certain scenarios. And I love how also you give space for all of those responses being appropriate in different scenarios. So there are certain scenarios when if your boundaries are crossed to a certain level, you don't care about keeping the person on your side anymore. Like that because the number one priority is your safety, right? But if the boundary is being crossed in a way that you've been able to anticipate and expect just because if you've been a part of a conversation like this before, then maybe you don't have to go into that automatic trauma response that, you know, happens to so many of us, and you can go into your more clear-minded, logical, okay, what am I going to do exactly in this moment? Let me assess the actual threat that's happening and whether or not I need to escalate or I need to just kind of like do some tricks and tips in order to get this person to behave.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I do talk about that. I think it's really important as performers that we have some self-awareness around what different types of trauma responses we lean into, those 4 that you mentioned. And then, you know, there are unhealthy manifestations of that, but there are also healthy manifestations. And so through this workshop, Body Tips, and what we're going to talk about today is that I really lean into healthy manifestations of that. Because you're right, like when you're faced with that scenario, especially if you're a newer performer or you're new to that space even, or maybe somebody does something in a way that is triggering to you, even if you're not aware of why, all thought goes out of your brain, right? Like you initially fall back on your most immediate trauma response. For me, it's fawning. But for others, it might be fight. So you might say something that, yeah, like you might say something that, you know, offends your audience member or your employer, or, you know, you might be in an unsafe situation where if you are a freeze responder, then you stay in that situation for longer. So yeah, it is really important to have that self-awareness.
So I wanted to have you give us like one taste of like a concrete tip. I remember one of the things that you said was super clever. There's so many. I just want you to give like a couple just so people get a little taste. But one of the things that was really useful, I remember you said, is like when you're first entering the space, that is your opportunity to like establish where your performance area is going to be a predictable moving object, and also to like have strength and power in that entrance. And I also loved it that you were like, if there's a large crowd, they're not going to be able to see your whole body, so have a veil and pop that veil above your head as you're moving through the space, so everybody knows like where you are and they can track you in the space. And that was such a clever tip. So I thought maybe you could tell people, what can we do in this scenario that's very common when an audience member comes up in the middle of your show and decides that they're the focus of the performance? And oftentimes they do it in a way that seems like they're kind of making fun of you, because they're in the scenario that you and I were in. This guy lifted up his shirt and like had his belly out and was just like, and he was getting so close to me, like so uncomfortably close. So what do you do when that happens?
Yes. What I lovingly refer to as the "I'm a belly dancer too" scenario. So pretty much anyone who gigs regularly has experienced this. If you're not familiar, like April said, it's oftentimes where like they invade your space without permission. They might try to mock your movements, and oftentimes they like to raise their shirt and do some kind of gyration to be like, yeah, look, my belly has skills. So the important thing to keep in mind is that these people aren't trying to be malicious. They're not actually trying to make fun of you. They just don't understand the boundaries of the situation and how their actions are affecting the presentation of your art. And nevertheless, it can completely derail your show and take focus away from you and your talent. So when this happens, you have 4 options that you can choose from. Within my workshop, I break down the 4 different responses that escalate, or you can feel free to nab the one that you feel most comfortable with. The first is you can do a nonverbal communication. So specifically for this situation, I would turn my attention and my body completely away from the person. I might even move to a different area of the stage or the dance space if possible, and let them keep doing their thing. Oftentimes, if you don't feed the behavior or give them attention, they tend to get the hint and go away. And your problem solved. No sweat off your back. The second option that you have is the coy response. or, you know, being coquettish, or turning something into like a humorous opportunity. I personally use coy responses as my go-to, and sometimes I will combine nonverbal and verbal communication to create a humorous situation. I might even sometimes stroke their ego in a way while reframing their behavior into something that's more desirable. And I'll de-escalate the situation in a way that keeps the audience member on my side. So in this instance, in which someone's in my space, I'm a belly dancer too, they're doing their thing, I might actually turn to them and I'll clap for them. I'll take a break. I'll have a moment, you know, and then I'll let them do their thing. Or, you know, maybe I might turn it into a mini dance lesson. So I'll do something simple, you know, like a hip drop or something that they can easily mimic. And then I will do something really hard. I might like drop into a split. What are they gonna do? And they'll be like, oh, can't do that, and they'll walk away. Or I might, if they've, you know, they're really kind of out of hand or whatever, I might do something, you know, very nonchalant. Like I said, do a hip drop, little mini lesson, get them all engaged with me, and then I'll give them a little shoulder shimmy. And a lot of times they'll get embarrassed and they'll go away, and they've solved the problem for you. Everyone else around you has a show. They're still being entertained. They're laughing. They're on your side. And then it's good. If all this happens and they still haven't gone away, I will do a ta-da, like, you know, and then clap for them and, you know, give them a gentle push off the stage or out of my space. And that usually works. Sometimes, though, you do have to escalate into the third option, which is a verbal communication. Or if you're not comfortable with the coy response and you don't feel it would be productive in that situation, then you should always feel empowered to speak up for yourself. And there's a way to give clear and concise verbal communication in a way that's still gentle and kind, but firm. So I like to say something like, you should join me during the interactive portion of my show later. It'll be the fourth song, you know, like I will give something very clear that's inviting them later. And then again, that gentle push off the stage, and then I'll turn away and go somewhere else. Yeah. Honestly, when you do that kind of thing, they will usually come back, and that's okay because you've told them that's when it's time to do that. So you've retrained that behavior. And they're usually the better tippers. I don't know why that's a correlation, but they feel special and, you know, great. Win-win. Lastly, the number 4 option is that hard boundary enforcement. All right. You always have the option of this. And I want to say that if you ever feel unsafe for any reason, trust your instinct and jump straight to this option. No one at any time has the right to invade your space, touch you, ask you to do things that you are not there to do. And you do not ever need to take ownership of someone else's poor behavior. You do have a right to bodily autonomy as a performer, which I know might have some cognitive dissonance around it because we're ultimately hired to do a job, to entertain, to please our clients. But nevertheless, it is true. You have the right to bodily autonomy and safety. So with all that being said, in this specific instance where someone is invading your space uninvited and you feel the need to enforce a hard boundary for whatever reason, immediately leave the area. That's it. Show's done. Go turn off your music, cue your DJ, whatever you have to do. If you feel like someone is out of control and they are putting you in an unsafe situation, vacate. Get your assistant, or if you have a friend there, or the event coordinator, the manager of the venue, whoever it is, just go and be like, hey, you know what? I'm feeling a little uncomfortable, really unsafe for X, Y, and Z reasons. I need them to go. And a lot of times, if you're hired to do a job, that person, that whoever's in charge of that space, that has invited you into it, they will be on your side and they will understand, and they'll either ask that person to go sit down or leave entirely. And you should not ever feel bad for that. All right. You might second guess yourself. You might think you possibly overreacted. Others might even try to say it was rude of you to stop dancing or ask them to leave. But only you were in that situation, right? And only you were able to pick up on whatever clues from that person that made you feel unsafe. And so you never need to justify your actions to anyone else. It's important that after that, and you've left that situation, like, you need to seek out a friend or an ally to talk things over with. I also personally recommend, if you are a performer, get a therapist. There's nothing wrong with that. And I really want to destigmatize seeking help for mental well-being. Belly dance is a beautiful art form that brings a lot of joy to our lives, but sometimes it does come with some uncomfortable situations that can bring up trauma responses within ourselves and trigger us in ways that we're not always aware of. And so definitely take time to process those feelings and experiences if you have them, so that you can not only take care of your body for your dance, but your mind, and you have a long, rewarding relationship with this dance. I also want to say that if you ever need that ally, even if we've never met, feel free to message me and we can talk through it. All right.
And you are such a good ally in that way, because I remember after that show that we did together, even I'm second guessing myself right now, because I'm like, I did do some clever things unintentionally, but the first thing I did was I said out loud in front of everyone, I said, "Do not touch me."
Yeah.
And afterwards, I was like, oh no, like that came off like really harsh right away and probably made people feel really uncomfortable. But I love that you're validating my response. It's like, hey, you know, you're the only one in your body who saw the trajectory of what was happening.
Yeah. And I do want to say something that I forgot to mention is that if you are a friend or another dancer that's at that same gig and someone is in the performer's space, like, I was behind the scenes, I was off stage, and I was watching April perform, specifically in the situation she's talking to. And honestly, I was filming her, did not intend to be able to use this clip for my workshop later, but here it was. It was a great opportunity. And you see where I like move the camera because it was going on too long and he was not getting the hint no matter what April was doing. And she says it was unintentional, but I've seen her do this 1,000 times at gigs where she like turns her attention away. She'll use her hair. She'll whip it back and forth.
I did try to hit him with my hair.
Yeah. Like, there's a lot of things you can do, but I had picked up my veil and I was ready to go and like drape it over his shoulders and like pull him off Charlie Chaplin style, like as a performer being like, ha ha ha. And like, you know, I was going to lead him back saucily and like sit him down at his chair. But like, if you are ever in that situation and your performing partner or your friend is unable to get this person to understand, feel empowered to go and force that boundary for them, but just do it in a way that doesn't disrupt the show, that you can't like play off as like, come with me. Oh, you're being naughty. They're like, whatever.
You're so good at that. You're so good at that. And I love how in the workshop too, you also like encourage us to have a buddy. And also I love this idea of like combining that with a mentorship kind of situation where like if you are a professionally gigging performer and you have a student who doesn't have that experience, like you could ask your student to come with you to help you pick up the tips at the end of the night or whatever it is that your assistant can do so that you can continue to keep yourself in that elevated position of the performer with a little bit of distance. And also, I don't want to give away too much more, but Cheyney also talks about good and bad ways to humanize yourself as a performer. Not good and bad, but like safe and unsafe ways. Like you don't want to humanize yourself in these certain ways that make you seem too small, too approachable, disrespectable, basically. But you do want to humanize yourself in other ways that make you seem approachable and kind and inspiring and get paid at the end of the day. Yeah. So I want to explicitly invite everyone who's watching right now and is like, okay, I need more of this information, because you do. To go apply for the Cohesion Collective and do it ASAP, because if you want to take this workshop live, it's part of an entire series with a lot of with 3 other really great workshops. And so I need you to apply ASAP if you want to get in on this live experience, which is going to be excellent. And you're going to get so many good practical tips. And I just can't wait. Thank you so much, Cheyney, for hopping on this live with me now, and also for bringing your expertise and experience into the Cohesion Collective.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Is there anything else you want to say or leave us with?
Yes, actually. No is a complete sentence.
Got it. Love that. Love that. That's a great sign off. Okay, everyone, thank you so much for being here. Go to thecohesioncollective.com, put in your application. It only takes 2 minutes, and I can't wait to see you inside the collective.
Bye. Thank y'all.
Bye.